So I didn't see much of anything. I'm taking from our conversation yesterday is that the offense started well, very much efficient, in sync. Cade McNamara looking good, everyone looking good, and then they just kind of got comfortable, had a couple score lead, and the offense kind of stagnated after that.
Yeah, I don't know that it's fair to say that the offense just got comfortable. I mean, given the history of Brian Ferentz led offenses, I would tend to think that the offense just sputtered and stalled. Um, Kirk repeated it again today in his Tuesday availability that he really does think the lack of game film on Utah State and their new DC that had a lot. It's just hard to run the football. I don't know. I don't know where I stand on that because I see a person's perspective that says, "Hey, this is a G5 school. You ought to be able to go up there with no game film, dominate up front physically, and run the ball for 150 yards." And they didn't even hit the 100-yard mark. So there are concerns there, sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm concerned to an extent. I do have an odd sense of confidence heading into this game on Saturday, and I'm laughing because I think the last time I've said that on this show was the 2021 Big Ten championship game, and I got ripped by a bunch of Michigan fans for that. But I just feel like that Saturday's game was still not. I have more faith in personnel with this team, and Saturday's result did not shake my confidence or trust in that. And I think fans need to be patient. There's a lot of negativity already. And I understand it. 24 points, people expected more, especially when you score 14 in the first two possessions, right? um, I had somebody say, they gave up 300 yards to a G5 program. They've never done that, or they don't ever do that. Well, that first of all, that's not that much. Second of all, rarely do they remove their starting quarterback for almost the entire fourth quarter, but they did because Cade is nursing that quad injury, and Deacon couldn't move the ball with that offense. So, of course, that gave the defense more opportunities to move and gain yardage. I am very, very hesitant to push the panic button. We'll see about the run game this Saturday. Iowa State traditionally does pretty well against the run, especially against Iowa's run. I mean, not like Iowa runs the ball great against anybody, frankly, but I think they'll run the ball better this weekend. I think they'll go over 100 yards, which isn't saying a ton, but that's saying a lot considering they couldn't even hit 100 against a G5 school at home. I think they'll go over 100 yards against Iowa State this weekend, and I think they win comfortably.
The only other couple things I want to hit on would be, was there anything defensively that would cause any type of concern? I know the viewer said 300 yards of total offense by a G5 team, but realistically, is there anything of concern defensively?
No.
Okay. I didn't think so.
Not really. I mean, Nick Jackson got isolated, star linebacker transferred in from Virginia. They really spread things out, and he got isolated on some receivers, and Iowa was not expecting that. And, he's not necessarily that type of a linebacker. They'll make adjustments to that stuff. There were people during the postgame show with myself and Coach Patterson that were complaining about Iowa not getting home with sacks. They had one sack on the day. Utah State's really well coached. I mean, I'm just saying, Blake Anderson, I believe he is one of the up-and-comers in the game. And they came with clearly the mindset of, we're going to get the ball out of the pocket quickly because we understand the defensive line is probably Iowa's strength. And Cooper Laga basically did not hold the ball long enough to be sacked at any point besides the one play. And I think I can't remember if it was who it was that got home, but Joe Evans was in the backfield a lot, and they'll be fine. I think they'll be fine. The biggest question mark I still have with the defense right now is at right corner, because shortly before the game began, we got word that Jamari Harris is one of the players that is facing a suspension due to the betting stuff. He will be back next week against Western Michigan. Just a 2-game suspension for Jamari, but that obviously affects him against Iowa State, and it just makes me think back to 2019 when Iowa was down a corner and DJ Johnson, who ended up transferring to Purdue, started for the first time, and Iowa State burned him on a double pass. I would not be shocked if I think it'd be criminal if they didn't try to attack Deshaun Lee, who's starting opposite Cooper DeJean. I thought Deshaun held his own on Saturday, but again, difference between Power 5 athletes and Utah State athletes, you got to attack him, that side of the field. Now, my big question is, can can they spread Iowa out? And do they have the athletes that they've had in the past to spread Iowa out enough to where you feel comfortable? Because, I mean, here's the deal. I didn't watch all that Northern Iowa game, and I know Levi will be able to give some insight on that. But Iowa State didn't, like, you look at their yardage numbers, they had less total yards than Iowa did against Northern Iowa. They had, I know, a pick six, had a couple turnovers in the game, which obviously is good. Jeremiah Cooper sounds like he was really good at safety. But I'm not convinced that this is going to be that Iowa State has any chance of scoring, 20 plus points in Iowa. First of all, when's the last time that's happened? 2017, when the last time they've scored more than 20 on Iowa. Now, you could argue the same thing for Iowa's sake, that Iowa's going to have a hard time scoring 20 plus, but I still think they're going to figure out a way to run the ball better. I wonder, with as much 13 and even 14 personnel as we saw on Saturday against Utah State, I know Iowa State's defensive backfield is deep, but I just wonder what they're going to do to defend that plethora of bodies. They just wear you down. I just see Iowa wearing a lot of teams down offensively. Even they're not going to score a ton of points, but they're going to wear you down defensively, and they're going to be really hard to defend near the goal line. So we'll see. I have question marks at corner, and there's still question marks with the run game, but I was encouraged by the pass protection, encouraged for the most part by the passing game. Still not enough wide receiver involvement, but I'm still relatively positive heading into this week. And like I say, I think they win. And I don't know the last time I've said I think they win comfortably. Comfortably does not mean, 20, but they win by 20. But I think they win by a touchdown or more. I don't think it comes down to a final field goal. And that's saying a lot because this series has oftentimes come down to, 3 or 4 points.
Comfortably in Iowa terms.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Comfortably in Iowa
I don't
terms.
consider that comfortably at all. But I get the context.
Yeah.
I want to hit you up with 2 players, and then we'll get to Levi.
Okay.
Jay Higgins is a player that, correct me if I'm wrong, that you saw during the offseason as a good player, a guy that would start or be a complementary piece, but not an impact emerging star in the defense. Then you certainly picked up on some comments that Kirk Ferentz said concerning his development, and then he was selected to appear at Big Ten Media Days, and now I see that he ripped off 16 tackles, which maybe it was set up for him and everything funneled to him, but still, he was cleaning up, obviously.
He was fabulous, and it's almost impossible to replace a guy like Jack Campbell. But we've said that kind of thing before. Remember how good Josie Jewell was in 2017?
Oh, yeah.
And Iowa has consistently, Christian Kirksey, Anthony Hitchens, they've had really good linebackers over the last 10 years. And so I just, if there's anybody that's going to do it, it's going to be Jay Higgins. He's a physical linebacker. He's patient. He's a great leader. I talked with Don Patterson on Saturday about the fact that he could have left. Like he was stuck behind Seth Benson and stuck behind Jack Campbell. And he could have went somewhere else and played. And they bring in Nick Jackson from Virginia, bunch of acclaim, had all those tackles, all the stats in the world. He not only stayed put, but he welcomed Nick Jackson into his home. They're roommates. They're best friends now. And I just think his leadership is so underrated. He was my player of the game Saturday. And like what you just said is so thoughtful, because we did look at linebacker as a potential weakness with this defense heading into the year because they lost Campbell and Benson. And yet, even just watching week 1, and we don't want to overreact to week 1, I'm guessing he'll end up being one of Iowa's 2 or 3 best defensive players at the end of the year. And he may be that right now. Like it may be Cooper DeJean, Jay Higgins, and then, Xavier Wampa, or maybe it ends up being like an Aaron Graves or a Joe Evans. But like, I think he's that good. And he was to the ball as quickly as you could think of a guy his size. And he stopped guys in their tracks. He's going to be a good one. I think he already is. And, I will see what happens. I heard some complaints about Nick Jackson, given the fact that they isolated him on receivers. That is a storyline to follow. Iowa played a ton of 4-2-5 with Sebastian Castor out there. But at one point, they did bring in Kyler Fisher and took out Nick Jackson. So it'll be interesting to see. You don't often see Phil mess with his top 2 linebackers. And even though I think he feels like Higgins and Jackson are interchangeable, I wonder if we don't see more of, if teams continue to do that, if we don't see more of Kyler Fisher, who's a former safety, come in and kind of be an extra, another DB in addition to Sebastian Castro.
Two quick notes on the offense, and you already touched upon one. Caleb Johnson, 19 carries, 63 yards, had a long run of 21 yards. So take that away, which of course you can't, but just follow 18 carries, 42 yards otherwise. That's paltry at 3.3 yards per carry and 2 yards plus per carry minus the long run. I want to point everyone to a video Corey produced addressing the running game in particular. So check that out on From the Hawkeye of the Storm, where Corey specifically addresses the running issues. I got to think Caleb Johnson's a top 10 running back. I ranked him fringe top 10 in the Big Ten. That they really need to cut him loose and get him some space. On the flip side, I know that you're excited about the tandem of Luke Lachey and Eric All. Did they play and were they on the field on a fairly large chunk of plays
Oh, absolutely.
together?
Like,
Yeah.
you're talking about Lachey and All.
Yes.
They, we saw, and like I say, we saw a lot of 13 and 14 personnel. We saw. I'm trying to think back to the combo down near the goal line. They scored a touchdown. Eric All was lined up as a fullback, and I know Steven Stilianos was lined up, and I believe Ostringa and Lachey were all. They had four guys out there, and then Hayden Large played as well, who's a tight end who's been converted into a fullback. So yeah, and I think they're comfortable actually going probably 5 or 6 deep at tight end. So I don't know. I the only worry I have with that is that you can get a little bit too cute. When you look at your group of tight ends, and Brian is, if he's anything, he's a tight ends guy, given the fact that he coached in the league and he coached a couple of great ones at New England. I do worry that maybe he gets a little bit too cute with that, and you get too heavy. You're really limiting what you can do. And as of Saturday, we didn't see Iowa be able to dominate up front in the run game. Iowa, Kirk wants to be able to run the ball even when the opponent knows you're going to run the ball and do so effectively, something Wisconsin's been able to do more years than not in the last 10, 15 years. Iowa has not been able to do that. Now, you mentioned the difference with Caleb Johnson. He needs to hit the holes harder, faster. I don't know that he's that type of a back. He's such a big guy, and he's physically impressive at like 6'1", 6'2". I think he's like 220, 225. Kind of resembles a slightly smaller Derrick Henry, but he does not pack the punch that Derrick Henry does. At least he hasn't shown that yet. And I think it was Don used the term glider on Saturday to describe Caleb. And I'm not saying he can't be as good as we thought he could be. He's ran a lot of yards in a short amount of time last year, and he is quick in the open. He's fast in the open field. But you know what I mean when I say glider, right?
Oh yeah.
I just don't know.
Instead of hitting that hole, he's searching, he's looking, and he's losing a lot of time and a lot of yardage doing that.
And is it fair to say like a guy like Eric Dickerson was sort of a glider? Is that fair?
Yeah, a very effective one.
Very effective one, yes. But I'm just saying, my point by bringing up Eric Dickerson is you can be successful as a tailback with that style of run. He's not LaShawn Williams. They're different backs. I will say this. The kid for Wisconsin, whose name escapes me.
Braylon Allen.
I think he's sort of that same way. We saw him struggle last year at times because even though he's huge, he needs space, and he needs space to maintain itself. That's why I'm still cautiously optimistic because, and I'm no O-line expert. When I watched Saturday's game, I was there in person back on Monday. I saw a lot of holes that were open and then closed just short of what Iowa needed. And I just wonder, Kirk was pretty positive about the run game today. He just felt like, hey, there was nothing physical really that we saw on tape. There's just little tactical things that we can clean up.